right screen.
All right, so the live stream has started. So if you want to introduce yourself and your topic, you can get started.
I actually have an intro slide as a general rule. So today we're here to talk about making some modules, or as I'll sometimes put it, how to build some better bricks. First, a bit about me. I'm James, Start Automating. Been programming for forever, and I've been programming PowerShell since about 2006. I was a team member of PowerShell between 2006 and 2010, and I got my fingers in all sorts of interesting little pies. Modules were not technically my feature, but that didn't stop me from creating some of the first ones. I've been playing with modules for a very, very, very long time. I also been running a PowerShell consultancy from 2010 till now, so between that and, my early adoption of PowerShell, back when they were called packages, I've been writing modules a long time, and I've written a lot of them, like probably a few hundred at this point, at least a good dozen this year, just to give you kind of context, and yes, I'm aware that it is 2020. Modules are an interesting beast in PowerShell because they're both very, very simple and also something that can get endlessly complicated depending on how you think of it. And today we're going to just talk about a few of the different ways that you can think of a module and hopefully help you understand each of the different aspects of a module by demonstration. So let's start really, really, really simple. When modules were just introduced, there was an MVP sitting next to me at this demonstration we did. And he had this moment of realization that kind of got jokingly burned in my brain. It says, modules are just friggin' scripts. Obviously, I'm being a little censoring, but the point stuck. This is one true way to think of them. Like, at the end of the day, if you have a file with functions in it and you just stick a PSM1 extension on it, you have a module. It's really that easy if you let it be that easy. That doesn't mean that's all you can do with it, but that's as simple as modules can be. Right? At the time that this guy made the quip, the predominant kind of user paradigm within PowerShell was people have a bunch of files or a bunch of functions in one file that are related, and they would take that file, copy and paste it in, and whatever functions were declared in that file would be exported. And in a module, that last part happens automatically, basically by it being a PSM1. And instead of dot sourcing it, you import module in. So you can take a bunch of functions, drop them into PSM1, and import module. And let's show you how that works. If I can actually copy all of my slide notes, I'll be a happy man. It looks like not, so I get to be glad that I already wrote out the file. All right, can everybody see this screen?
Yeah. Yep.
So right now, I have this PSM1 for File Finder. This is a really simple module that I've just kind of thrown together to demonstrate some of the concepts here. Imagine you needed to find old, fresh, big, and stale files, right? I can just have X number of different functions declared in one script, and I can import module file finder PSM1 force pass through. This is the way I'll tend to run it because this makes it easier for me to actually see what exports are there and the like, and the dash force is used to make sure you explicitly reload. And now we come to the point where the demo gods are not necessarily being my friends, or I'm forgetting what's different between script modules and not, because I'm not seeing my exports here. So let me get module. There we go. Okay. Find big file in my root. Well, I got nothing over a megabyte there. If I look for a bigger than let's say a kilobyte. Actually, I'm a little surprised. I guess they are all that small. There, bigger than a half kilobyte. So this part's pretty easy, right? This is an easy enough thing to understand. You take your functions, you drop them into your script, you're good, or you're good enough. If you need to make a module for your boss and you've got a few functions hanging around, you copy paste, throw them into a file, you're done. Does this make sense to everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Unfortunately, it has its drawbacks, and these are often the most primitive form of modules. Not that there's anything particularly wrong with that, except that they're not versioned, and they get really unwieldy really quickly. And by unwieldy, I mean that basically whenever you have multiple people editing a set of modules, it gets really awkward to actually work with a large single file. Similarly, when you're trying to actually work your way around which functions where inside of a file, it gets, well, mildly annoying at the very least, and incredibly annoying the larger it gets. Now, some of these end up being thousands upon thousands of lines. They just kind of grow that way because people don't know any better, and that's why they're derisively nicknamed module monoliths. No code in an individual file makes it easier to find what you need. Or sorry, in one file makes it much harder to find what you need, and it's pretty impossible to, collaborate at that point. So it's better to actually see modules as a set of scripts and not a single script. And on that, I've actually gone and already done a bit of work. If I look at each individual find big file here, all that I need to actually just do that one function in that one file. And I can very easily locate which individual one I'm working on, and if I were to say, you go work on find old file, I'm gonna work on find stale file, then we can make sure we're not stepping on each other's code. Now, in this case, you get into what's much more common with the PSM1. And what you're gonna do, instead of declaring it all as one big go, is you're going to import stuff relative to script root. Now, who here knows what dot sourcing is? Or has done it before? That seems like a decent display of hands. It's kind of hard to make out. But that's really all you do here. You got a magic variable called ps script root. And I'd say find big file. Find old file. Find stale file. And find fresh file. So also, that's really not that hard, right? In recent years, months, I've gotten considerably more lazy in how I write my modules, though, and nowadays I tend to write something like this for each file in get child item path ps script root filter star-star.ps1 file full name. So this will take any file that has this star-star naming pattern, and it'll include it. And it makes it easy for me to just declare a function, drop it in the right folder, and have it included in my module. So let's go re-import file finder again to understand why it's not showing me exported commands for that. 1 second. Probably has something to do with having a couple of them loaded. Yeah, I dislike it when the demo gods work against me, but we'll find out what's going on here in a second. I would have expected an export from this thing, I'm not. Let's save the file and make sure I'm not a fool that way. Let's make sure I'm dealing with the right file finder. PSM1, I am not. There we are. Sorry, I put the monolith form in a different folder and just edited it directly. Now, I'm accidentally showing a pretty common PowerShell convention. You tend to have your modules in the same name directory. Makes them easy to locate, and it makes PowerShell work in some fun magic ways. That's better. Except for the fact that I only have 3 functions, I'm going to bet you that I failed to rename one of these. Find big, find stale, find fresh. I bet you find old. Copy and paste functions, they have copy and paste errors. Sorry. Well, that's a little unfortunate. Sorry about that. Now, before I move on, is there anybody that has any questions about the function we see on the screen?
Not I.
Nope.
Nope.
YISE.
Why ISE?
Because I'm lazy and old-fashioned. All right. So let's re-import. Now I've got all 4 functions. I'm a happy man. And let's get back onto it. Now that you guys have seen how easy it is to break them up into a single, from one monolith file into a single set of files. You can also obviously use code collapsing as your friend. Like just collapse down to a definition, copy paste that. You can also use the AST if you want to be that fancy about it. I've got some other scripts you can use to go ahead and extract out individual functions from the script. If you need to break up a really big monolith, drop me an email. It's no big. But it's ideal to actually have these separated files, and I hope you all understand why now. Do you?
Yeah.
Sweet. And moving on. Sorry about that last bit. You clearly see that PSM1s will import the scripts. Now, are you ready for your first weird curveball?
Yes.
Okay. Modules can just be a DLL. A really old-fashioned way to think of modules is snap-ins. And in the very, very early days of PowerShell, like V1, you had to write all your commands in C#. And commands were loaded as snap-ins. Believe it or not, a lot of people still write their commands in C# because, I don't know, they like C# a lot. Technically, this is called APS snap-in, although technically it needs registration information to actually work as a snap-in. All of them work with import module. So what import module will do, if you point it at any given DLL, is it'll try to load it as if it were a C# DLL, and it'll look for commandlets. And if they were found in there, it'll import them. Now, unfortunately, I don't have tons of binary commandlets on the system. It's not the easiest thing for me to demo. I can show you some of the built-in ones, but the kind of important thing for you to understand here is that it'll load your DLL one way or the other. If it finds any commands, it will import them, but your DLL is still loaded and all the types within the script or within the DLL are loaded as well. This is handy. It's just about as easy to write as add type for doing the same sort of thing. It's easy enough to throw into your manifest, as we'll cover later, to make sure it loads whenever your module does. And it's useful if you decide that you need to actually write C# commandlets and need to load them. So if you're going really, really high level, there are actually 3 types of modules, and we've shown you 2 out of the 3 so far. Script modules, which are just a freaking script, which I ideally should be just one script that loads several others, and what are called binary modules, which are just a DLL. If that DLL happens to contain PowerShell command let's party on, if not, I've got to load a DLL. Okay, everybody's got that dirtball in mind?
Yeah.
Probably not going to use it every day. Good to know, though.
Here's a question.
Yeah. How I
Go
see
for
the
it.
breakup of the scripts, but are you building the scripts together to make a module? Or I don't see any command. Or maybe did I miss?
Yes, you write the scripts to make a module. As again, they are just scripts.
But do you have?
So if you have a function file, you can just go ahead and include that from a PSM1. And in most cases, your PSM1 can be very simple, as you saw, are started out as this form of simple, explicitly whitelisting each file, and got to this. So you're talking about a few lines, very, very few lines for your core module file to just import the individual functions. And if you're not used to writing functions, one thing to kind of understand in PowerShell is that I can just take this, put function foo around it, now I got a function. If I had parameters in there, that would also still work. All right, so it's easy to turn scripts that you got on disk into functions and into part of a module.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes.
I got a question
Does
as
that
well.
answer your question?
We've got another question.
Sure.
Is lines 1 through 5 the same as your for each loop?
Yes.
So you can just omit
So-
the first 6 lines and it wouldn't matter? Okay.
Yeah.
I thought so.
Let me actually do this in the right file though. So that's import, wax on.
Save first.
I have to get to the point where I'm actually waxing off. Oh yeah, I also need to re-import and save my file. That helps. There. Also, you're getting a very simple sense for how handy pass-through is, just being able to see, yeah, I'm exporting. Yes, there's the functions that I've got. It gets less useful if your module has lots of commands, but you can still look at what a module exports, and we'll cover that as we go on later.
Would it be fair to say a PSM or PSM1 file is like the entry point to your module?
Yes, that is a wonderfully fair way to say it, and I will spoiler alert one of my bonus points things. You can actually have arguments. So you can import module with an argument list, and you can have arguments in this file. That opens all sorts of other interesting fun doors that are probably beyond the scope of what we'll get into today. But yes, they are just a freaking script in almost all ways. We'll get into some of what that means later, but the biggest almost all way to understand right now is your argument formats could not allow commandlet parameter sets. Aside from that, they're basically the same as any other script you use. In PowerShell v2, this variable only existed inside of modules, but in v3 and onwards, it's whatever your current script root is, no matter where you are. So if it's whatever this file's script root is. Let me uncomment that back out. Any more questions before we keep moving on?
Doesn't seem like it.
Sweet. Okay. This is another way to think of modules that is irrespective of whether they are binary, script, or manifest. Modules can have help. Modules have help.txt documents. They live in the root or a localized subdirectory. So when you say get help, name of this particular file, you'll see a help topic. This is actually a really great way to have a manual. When you're doing get help, say, about regular expressions, right? Sorry, I might not have updated help on this box yet. I hope I have. If I didn't, that's going to be a really slow thing. You can actually do this on the topic that I have locally. In fact, let me show you how to make it here. Make dir enus, cd enus, about file finder .help.text. Module. Okay. Help about file finder. So this is really handy on multiple levels. One is it gives you a way to actually build the manual and ship it with your module. And I hope everybody here knows inline help and knows how to make get help work with their individual commands, but beyond get help working with a command, having high level about topics is a really good way to have an intro to what your module is supposed to do and how to use it. Now the other benefit, these are commonly known by the way as about files, although technically they can be called whatever you'd like. The other benefit is that they actually end up being really easy to turn into Markdown. If you look at the way that I read this on the console, it's actually not that disruptive to see bits of Markdown inside of these. So a really common approach is to have this be copied to a readme.md to make it look and work better in, say, GitHub. Make sense? So your module can be your manual about itself. Meta cool? Mind's blown?
Is there a way to get the README to work the same way as the help text? Or do you have to have both files if you want to have README?
You'd have to copy over each of the help texts into READMEs, unfortunately, but that's a really easy script to write. You just, dir, directory, copy back to this. The cool thing though is that you can have different locales of topics. So if I had, I could say make dir D, and this would be the German help topic. And so if I work in a multinational company, I can actually allow there to be internationalized documentation for my module. And it's really quick and easy to implement. And you can basically hunt that path over your colleague. You can basically say, I've written you an about topic in English, use Stefan, translate it in Danish. This is probably not a hypothetical. I will be asking somebody to do this year. So they're nice. The other thing that's kind of nice about them is because it's such a consistent approach, and this is something that's true for basically everything in the module ecosystem that I'm talking about today. Because things are done consistently and are programmatically discoverable, you can build tool ecosystems around them. So it's really easy to actually build something that, say, takes your about text, copies them into README to make GitHub pages. Make sense?
Yeah, I had a question.
Okay.
Because initially with the multiple scripts, you said instead of having a single PSM1 file, you split the commands out into separate files, and then add that into the module one. Can that be done with the help as well?
It has to be done with the help as well. You can only have one help topic per file, A, and B, Well, you can make them have an interrelation in Markdown, basically. That's going to look a little bit weirder on the console, but it'll work in the README context. But it still will, you don't have a way to pack 3 or 4 of them into one of them or to reference another topic automatically within one of them. You just have to type, see also this thing. So it's, as the extension implies, just a text file. Whatever is in here will come out here.
Oh, so you just have to create multiple help text files for each of the different commands? Is that what you're doing?
Oh, you don't need to for the commands. The commands you get on your own. So I guess I will cover this real quick in terms of function design. If I say get help, find old file, okay? This is populated here.
Oh,
So
okay.
if I wanted to say this, I can add find old file, root path, PWD older than, date time, now, add days, -1. Finds files older than yesterday.
Oh, okay. I forgot about that, sorry.
Oh, no worries. I think that this is good practice to do. And getting really way ahead of things, there are a couple of tools that you can use to double check your help within a module. I actually haven't been very thorough in this one, so this is going to complain about stuff me a lot. ScriptCop is a very old module. I think it's one of the first ones that I published externally, but it's one of the tools that you can just run your module against, and it'll tell you what it needs help-wise. That is somehow taking an inordinate long time to import this moment. There we go. So I can say import module, file finder, force, pass through, test command. And then it'll kvetch about various things. In this case, lack of interlinking help, lack of documentation regions, so on and so forth. So once you're in the module, it's a lot easier to basically build cohesive tooling that'll help your module, including tooling that'll basically check all your help docs, make sure they're all right enough, which these are not yet. This is a demo module, not a perfect one. It's designed to be bad. More questions on module help before we move on?
No.
Okay, are you guys all, or ladies and gentlemen, all ready to get relatively geeky?
Yes.
Yeah.
Always do it.
Okay. So if you ever ask a developer of PowerShell about modules while they were being built, well, you're going to get really technical really fast, and you're going to highlight a major strength. You ask most devs, they would say, module is a closure. Well, what the hell does that mean? Right? Technically, this means that they can store information and choose what to export. The easiest way to think of closures, if you're used to most programming, is that a closure is a scope. It's a point at which variables can be defined and not leak out. Okay? But it's actually a little bit more than that, technically speaking, because it's actually an isolated section of memory, not necessarily, protected, but it's isolated from the rest of the system in terms of what it knows about itself. Another way that you might be able to wrap your head about it is containers. It's kind of easy enough to think of a module as a container, it's just not an isolated container. Does this make sense?
Yep.
Okay. I know that this is gonna probably overdo me telling you to let it sink in, but this really is huge. I mean, this really is an incredibly big part of what makes modules special and useful. Why? Among other things, a module can cache. If you can enclose data, you can cache that data. I can do this by declaring a script scope variable. Have you ever written like global foo? Yeah? Well, I can define script :var, and that'll be available throughout the module. Better yet, if I declare a variable in the PSM one, it's implicitly script scoped. This is very useful for all sorts of things, but a few short examples are performance, writing interlink commands, and commonly used internal resources. Do you want to kind of try to adopt this in our little module?
Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
Okay. So, this is okay for small directories. If I've got a really, really big set of files underneath a directory, this is going to take a while, right? So one place I can apply caching is here. Basically skip needing to do this if I'm going against another directory that I've already gotten. Okay. With me so far?
Yeah.
The other place that we can apply common validation is here. Well, this is okay, but if I just point you at a file, it's not really that useful. And if I point you at a registry path, it's not necessarily going to crop the bed, but it's not going to behave well. That's just wasting your cycles, right? So what we can do is we can add a common validation to this. Does everybody know about validate script?
Yeah.
Yes?
In the argument, yeah.
Say what?
It's in an argument, yeah.
I
I'm
could
sorry,
not
in a
understand what you
parameter.
said.
I'm sorry, in a parameter, yes.
Using it on a parameter you have seen before?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I'm actually kind of kicking myself about the way I finally figured out how to do what I've been meaning to do for a while with those, but we'll get back to that after we cache. So we're going to do two things here. First, we're going to cache this variable, okay? Actually, three. We're going to add a force parameter to invalidate the cache. I've said will always enumerate files. Okay. If not file cache, one file cache because I'm inside of the function here. I want to say script file cache is this. If I don't, if I have script file cache of root path, then I don't need to invalidate it or get it, but if I don't have that, I need to go get the files. It does make the code a little complicated, but it also makes it a lot quicker. So if I didn't have a collection of files to cache, create that. If I did have a file cache and I've got, or for the root path, or if I didn't have a file cache for the root path, populate it. And if force, then invalidate that cache. So this would fail, okay? So we're going to do that. Import module, file finder, force, pass through. Okay, so we're going to do find old file on scratch, root path. I should definitely have some files that are older than a year here, but it's a pretty big directory. Yeah, quite a few files that are older than a year. Untake or remove this just to show the difference, but running again, should be faster than running the first time. Your mileage will vary depending on how much you're caching. Possibly if you hit Control-C before it has a chance to do so. Actually, you know what? I'm going to end up doing a call back here. Who went to the performance talk I gave a couple of months ago?
About 6, if you can't see the hands.
I was not looking at the hands, I was typing. So one of the things I called out in there was the performance of where object. I have absolutely no idea how many thousands of files I've gotten there. And it's not really demonstrating what I would like as elegantly as I would. So I'm just going to go ahead and do this instead. One of the things that, again, can kill your perf is unnecessary pipelining. And that is unnecessary pipelining. We wanted to get fancier, we could add some progress bars, but well, we'll see how long this takes the first time and how long it takes the second time.
Don't progress bars slow things down a lot anyway?
I think I discussed this in the performance talk. They do and don't. They give you a sense of what's going on, but they do take time to emit. And they do take considerably more time in the IIC than they take in console. Also, geez, how much do I have in my scratch directory? Okay. Once, twice. Be good to be demo gods. Hopefully you can all get the point of what I'm trying to demonstrate, whether what I'm trying to demonstrate is cooperating or not. Yes?
Yep.
Yep.
Cool. Sorry, this is what I get for demo thrown together in an afternoon. So the other thing that I said we could apply this to is the validation. All right. So yeah, well, I let that run. Let's hold up a second. Let me throw in my stub of my validate script again, and then let's figure out if once actually took less than time than twice. Okay. H of -1, H of -2, and execution time minus H of -1, start execution, or -2, start execution time. So our first one took 38 seconds, and our second one took 36. Well, geez, that's not exactly a bang for the buck that I was expecting. I'm sure I should have saved here. Anyway, validation. The way I would actually generally approach this sort of thing would be to have something like if, get item, roll path, or path. Okay? If file item PS is container. So if it's not a container, then throw must be a container. And I would need to return true if it was otherwise valid. Okay? So if I now try to say import module go say find old file, root path. If I wanted to get fancier with that and say it needs to be a directory of a particular provider, I can. But what if I wanted to use this on all 4 functions? Do I really want to copy and paste in 4 places?
No.
Okay. So what I can do is I can define the variable that captures that here. Validate root path. Again, once I figured this out, I kind of started kicking myself. So move that up there. Did I typo? No, I didn't save. So now I can take this and I can actually copy and paste this over to all my other functions. And now I have consistent validation everywhere in my module for the same thing. Pretty nifty, right?
Yeah.
Hey, sorry to interrupt. I know everybody here is starving since the pizza was delivered to a lake instead of here originally. So the pizza has arrived. Hopefully we can take a 5-minute break in the near future.
Holy shit, does everybody get a pizza?
Whenever
Yeah,
it's
What happens when 25 people sign up?
sorry, James, what was
I
that?
was thinking about it until now.
Well, if you want to grab food, feel free.
No, that will take longer than 5 minutes.
Got it.
But please, I will not, stand in the way of the famished.
All right, cool.
Feel free to
second-
shout out questions while munching. But we can pause here. It's a pretty nice pause point.
I have a question, just real quick. You just created you guys can eat, I don't know. You just created a function, the validates function into the main PSM1 file, correct? And then just applied that function into the other scripts.
Yes.
Basically.
So remember how I said that this is easy to turn into a function, right?
Yeah.
Well, a script block is too. And it's easy to take a script anywhere and use it any way you'd like, essentially.
That's really
So
cool.
what we're just doing here is declaring the script block.
Mhm.
And then, again, once I figured out how to do it this way, I started kicking myself.
It can be accessible
Yes.
through all the
You just
other-
call it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's it.
Okay. Yeah, that's really nice.
Pizza,
Yeah.
pizza.
Did you get Little Caesars? They apparently deliver now.
It's
The one around here is actually pretty good, weirdly enough.
Little Caesars
I
good
remember
everywhere.
getting Little Caesars as a kid, but I don't remember actually, them failing to deliver it.
Owned by our.
My parents were pathologically cheap though, so. You know what's really sad about this? I probably was trying to figure out a way to do this thing that now appears totally obvious sitting on the screen for like 6 or 8 years.
Yeah, I didn't know.
The
you
right
could do that.
elegant way to do it. Because here's the thing. This isn't legal. So the way that I kind of natively assumed, oh, I could do it that way. No, that doesn't work. But that does.
Yeah, because there has to be a script block in that validate script attribute.
Yeah, but at least now you can make it one line that's always the same, and you could use this on 50 different parameters.
Interesting.
Indeed.
Does it work without the return statement? Like, can you just call the function instead of the validate script?
I doubt it, but let's find out.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious. I know return statements work kind of weird in PowerShell.
Yeah, dude.
All right, let's see. It does. Copy that.
Yeah.
The reason I would generally doubt it is that this does actually have to have a return value.
Yeah.
But I suppose that it's just truthy or falsy.
Hmm.
So it doesn't matter whether it actually has a value coming back from this in a return, just a value emitted.
Hmm.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, PowerShell return statements just return an object to the pipeline, right? They just output an object.
I'm 99% sure that they are exactly that. It's the 1% of doubt that's making me wonder why it would be different. The thing that's a little bit different here, and that will be different in a number of contexts, is that they're being used as a delegate, and in a delegate, a return is a return.
Hmm.
And a strongly typed one at that. And in a lot of delegates, they won't emit. Some other delegates, however, will complain when you emit, and some other delegates will just crash when you emit.
Huh.
Delegates in PowerShell are fun. You're actually likely to have used them if you ever did an add event listener sort of thing.
Mm.
Then you used delegate in PowerShell. The other case that you might have used it for is regex replace. You can basically say here. You can say input pattern script block to replace whatever match you have. I can actually show you a demonstration of that one later, just popping through modules.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
So I'm pretty new to PowerShell, but how would you go
Okay.
about debugging, basically debugging? And like, is there a step counter or a step? I mean, you're using ISE.
Once more than
Yeah, press F9.
Once more than ID. Anyway, you can load in VS Code.
Actually, let me put this in a couple places. Let me put this right up here in my validate. And let me put that in our PSM1 here on our throw. They're hitting the validate one, hitting F5, they're hitting the throw. Why ISE? Because this works reliably in ISE, and it's still kind of a little hit and miss, though it's getting a lot better in Go.
Code's actually been kind of getting worse lately, which is a little bit disturbing.
See, I was trying to be like a good soldier there and, say that it could be getting better, but when you tell people that it's getting worse, you destroy their hope for it and mine.
Well,
It'll
maybe
get better, eh?
maybe I'll inspire someone to contribute since it's all open source.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe.
I looked at that code base, and it's a steeper cliff than ISE, by far. And I can do quite a bit in this environment.
I just wish they made ISE a little bit more user-friendly.
I can do quite a bit in this department, especially considering Microsoft has now officially said they're not going to do anything to ISE. That means the ways that I can hack into ISE, those will never die.
Whoa.
That
That's a
would be cool.
different topic for a different day. Or how did the Star Wars people kiss off such stories? Story for another time.
Well, I think everybody's back, so.
All right. So, just one last little bit on cacheability. Your data is unloaded with the module. You actually have an event handler that you can stick a script block onto that'll actually handle whenever you unload a given module. And so, not only does this stuff naturally fall out of scope, just before it does, you can do whatever you would like to clean up. And I'll be covering this again in bonus points, but if I wanted to have something like that, and it's sad that I remember this right off the top of my head, but my invocation, my command, script block on remove. Or sorry, script block module on remove. And now we get to check my memory and see if it barfs on me. Nope, okay, fine. Getting back to it. So caching modules is cool, right? We already took a pretty detailed look. Yeah? Okay, the next thing to understand about modules is a little bit more of a, brain fun, but it's very, very useful. So modules, by default, they'll export every function that you want or have. They won't export variables or aliases, but there is nothing in the world stopping you from doing so. In fact, you can use export module member to do exactly that. You don't have to use export module member, but the moment that you start using export module member, you're constraining your outputs to just what you've said export module member to be. In the PSD1, the module manifest, which we will get back to, you can also list functions to export, aliases to export, variables to export. This is another layer of constraint. So even if you said export module member foobar, if you've got functions to export and that foobar is not in that functions to export, it will not export it. Now, certain companies like PSD1 declared exports and make group policies for it, but most of the time, people will either get by allowing it to automatically export or explicitly exporting. And if you wanted to make shareable variables or common aliases, then you can export module member, variable, or alias. So let's just go throw a couple more into that now. For alias, old file, and I'm going to set alias, name, old file, actually going to be really nice to people. I'm going to also give you old files in case you're typo happy. Now see, since I didn't have any function in there, it exported these, but if I run old file right now, I don't know find old file. If I put export, that'll export what I like. I have to save my file though. This is the fourth time that's happened lazy. Okay. And now I can say old files, root path, pwd. But I don't have any really old files underneath the current directory. Okay?
Yeah.
So you see how that part works?
Cool.
Yeah. If I wanted it to actually say, let's see, just my computer name, even though I can get this an environmental variable, this is to demonstrate a point. Everybody sees the variable's not set. I've saved my file. I'm an idiot. Save my file again. There we go. Oh, Travis, you may tell your friend or your roommate, he is right about the Surface Book. It is a very nice computer.
He's right here. He can hear you.
I'm
Yeah,
so
I
jealous, James.
replaced the Pro 7 with a Surface Book.
buy me one?
No. Anyway, so these are the simplest ways you manage your exports and constraints. When we get back into manifests, we can talk more about them. But these are handy because what this allows you to make sure you do is only export what you need to. Most users prefer to have modules to have a discrete set of related commands. You don't want to export every command in the universe. You don't want to export a bunch of internal logic. They like a small set of commands that does an understandable set of things. Okay? Make sense?
Yep.
Sweet. Okay, we get to go away from demos for a bit. I did just mention exactly what I just had through on the screen. It'll let you only expose what commands you need. Now, the next thing to get is that they're portable. Now, for the most part. This might be obvious at this point, but modules were designed from the get-go to be portable. Another common response that you get from a developer if you ask them what a module is, it's an X-copyable based package for PowerShell. Most modules work just fine like this. You take a module, you drop it into any directory you'd like, and you import a module that PSM1 or PSD1. Take a module and you drop it into a directory named itself, and you're good to go. You put it into one of the magic directories, the Documents, Windows, PowerShell modules, or PSO modules, or Program Files modules, then get module list available, just pick it up. Now, the caveat is that sometimes specific programs or assemblies must be installed, so not 100% of modules makes or are so nicely portable. A great example for this is our, well, Microsoft or third-party modules that require, say, SharePoint or the like to work. These will actually generally come installed with a product, and you don't have to worry too much about it, but they won't generally be something you can X-copy elsewhere. This sort of approach obviously makes a given module less portable. But they really should be designed with portability in mind. You want your users to be able to copy your module easily and take it elsewhere. See, it's a really key part of the next thing we're going to look at about modules. Everybody get this basic portability design goal?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the reason the modules are supposed to be portable is because they're designed to be packages. Okay? It's a little frustrating in that PowerShell V2 introduced modules and it took till V5 to get the gallery. But basically, this was always the hope, to have a nice gallery full of modules or packages that people can share, right? And this was very much designed with Node Package Manager in mind and other similar formats. So this is the approach that you should be taking. You should be making your module so that it could be published elsewhere, and it should be carryable and portable. And you should be using a module manifest to describe the contents of the module. Up till now, we've kind of stayed away from them. We've mentioned them a couple times, but now we're going to start to get a little bit deeper with what they do. This also does, obviously, a little bit more than just describing the PowerShell module, but it's really something you're going to need to understand. Now, again, as mentioned, using PowerShell greater than 5, you can actually use the PowerShell gallery. You can use find module to find modules that other people wrote, and install module to go install them, -scope current user if you need to not run as an administrator, and you can use publish module to publish your own modules. What people aren't generally as clear about is that you can also do this against a private NuGet server or a UNC path. So you can basically just have a module share at your company and publish module to that share and install module from that share. So as we go through the module manifest, let's kind of change the way we think about modules once more mentally. Module metadata is stored in the PSD1 file. Usually, again, it's the same name as the directory. PSD1 is just a PowerShell hash table that cannot have scripts, use commands, or use variables to keep it safe. This way I can load up a PSD1 and actually just read the data from it and not allow you to potentially run a command that would pwn my box. All right? Makes sense to everybody?
Yeah.
Kind of handy. You can actually use this mode of PowerShell in other ways. It's called data language. You can do data, script block, and then inside there you can only do this sort of format of PowerShell. But it's implicitly the way Power Module manifests work. There's only one field that you really require. And this is actually kind of cool to get. We can do interesting things with it later, but you only require a module version. Everything else is optional. All I need to basically do is say this directory is this particular version. You'll probably, however, also use root module or module to process. Either one is the name of the initialization script, which is stored in the same directory as your PSD one. Root module is recommended by PowerShell officially. Module to process works on V2 and greater. I don't know what more to tell you about this than I would agree that root module is a more obvious name than module to process. Module to process was the original one. So if you have users that still use V2, first smack them, then give them module to process. Right? Actually, we'll get back to building that PSD structure in a bit. Now, you can create a module manifest with new module manifests. I don't tend to do it. I like doing it by hand. It looks really messy, and it asks you for a lot of stuff that you won't generally need. So now that we can kind of see the manifest kind of open-ended nature, so it's just basically your data file. One mental pivot that I think it's useful as you think about what a module is to just start to view them as directories with metadata. Getting a little bit longer with the thought, PowerShell module can be thought of as a directory tree with whatever you want in it, bit of metadata that describes it, that'll probably have a script that runs when it loads, that almost definitely exports PowerShell commands. Okay? Or to put it way more pithily, module is what you make out of it. Even if you're just using a module for like their threadbare structure, to basically say, here, I've got a directory full of data files, it's useful. It lets you know what version of data files you have. It gives you the capability to describe some extra metadata and programmatically pick it out. It gives you a way to publish that internally or externally if you need. All right? It's an easy structure to adopt. And because it's fairly open-ended and you can put a fair amount in it, and because it's very metadata happy, I find that this is a great lens to view modules. Now, since this is a bit of a brain, anybody have any questions on this one?
No.
Okay. Well, then we get to go back to demo mode. First, we're going to show a metadata-only module. And this one I actually already have written out for you. Just the metadata. I got an about topic. I got PS1. I have no PSM1. I have no root module. This will import the current directories module, just FYI, the /. But I get help about just the metadata. And hopefully if you can read the screen and put 2 and 2 together, you can realize this is a great way to basically ship an internal manual. So if I just want to have, here is your guidebook of how to work at Loan Depot, right? Just sticking a PSD1 in the directory gives me a versioning on that guidebook. And and gives me an installation mechanism around it. Not bad for like 2 lines. You know? And really, honestly, we don't have to count this line. So the next thing I'm going to show real quick is a very minimal module. And then that, I will actually go from scratch. I'm going to make a minimal module here of PSM1, PSD1. And I'm going to leave this as something of a monolith just because it's really tiny. Function show it worked. Okay, so I got my one function in there. Now, right now, if I try to import this directory, it'll yell at me because the PSD1 wasn't valid. But all I need to do to make it valid is module version is 0.1, root module is min module.psm1. So the difference between a module done well and poorly is actually very, very small if you start from this sort of scratch. Right? It's really easy to cat out these 2 files and get started. It'll take you all about 30 seconds. And it's very, very easy in my mind, at least, to keep just these 2 fields in mind and use that as the basic starting point for your built module. The last thing that I want to show on this topic is new module manifest, partially to show you how messy it is. So we're going to go back into our file finder here. All right, we're in a new module manifest, path, file finder, PS1. Those are all the parameters it naturally has, which is a little bit overkill. It's handy as a reference to see what's there. Considering we're only going to use a couple of these, I really don't need a lot of this, and I don't want a lot of this help. It's great to know that you can do it. This help is a wonderful reference if you're trying to figure out what the deal would be with a given field, but it's overkill for me. So I'm going to say root module is file finder.psm1. Keep GUID because I'm lazy. You'll want to GUID if you're publishing a module externally. It's handy to have one internally. I also don't like the way that they assume some of these variables or the way that they write them out. I don't think many people want to copyright things with their personal name. But anyway, get rid of all this stuff.
What is the GUID actually used for?
What all GUIDs are used for. Pop quiz to the room. Who knows what GUID stands for?
Graphical user interface.
Globally unique identifier.
Globally unique identifier. So that's what the GUID is. This you literally can make all GUIDs now until the end of time, and they should never be the same.
Right, but in the PowerShell module, what is the GUID used for? Like, I've seen cases where people copied and pasted the same GUID from the same manifest, and I've never seen a single downside. So I've always been curious, is it actually used for anything? Does the gallery care? Does anybody care?
The gallery most definitely will care.
Okay.
I would expect it would be something that would collide on a given box, and I'd be a little bit disappointed if it doesn't.
It doesn't. I can tell you that.
Okay.
I don't think on the box, I don't think Windows or PowerShell itself cares about anything other than the directory and the version folder.
You may well be right. I don't deeply care other than to tell you that it's probably not an ideal thing to take something designed to be globally unique and duplicate it without, thinking it through.
Oh, we've of course fixed it. I mean, I just found that, we had some for quite some time with no ill effects, historically speaking.
Well, sometimes you learn new things.
Or you just
Yeah, I would expect there would be no more deleterious side effects. I would also suspect that if there ever were, and customers ever hit them, they would raise bloody hell. So maybe there were in the past and they've gone now. Maybe I've been wrong all this time. We will not know.
We weren't publishing to the gallery, to be fair, so the gallery may well care.
Yeah.
But as far as installing from like a internally hosted feed, we never had any problems.
Huh. All right. Well, good to know.
Well, that's not required, right? The GUID is not required.
The GUID is required when publishing to the gallery. So I would suspect they care. Again, I would be disappointed if not. If anybody else wants to run the test, fine, forgive me, and it would just be too embarrassing for me to. If it works, especially. Like just publishing a module just to prove that I can publish a module with the same GUID, that's a little petty childish. So, yeah.
Call it pen testing.
You're welcome to. But speaking of the PowerShell gallery, 2 commands you want to know, if you don't already, because they're handy. Find command and find module. I actually like using find command when I'm trying to figure out if command already exists. Like I was earlier trying to figure out if, actually, this one I was thinking about writing and then I found that there are several. So that's a handy thing. You can also find module, and I don't have to have these installed, obviously. I just have to go be able to use them, or use the command. I'll find one of my own. So yeah, that's handy. It's nice. Now, obviously, I should be able to install module as well. And since I've already got some of these around here, let's do install module. You know what, actually, I'm going to check this join object one out. I have not. But since I'm running as a low rights user, I'm going to say scope current user. We hope the people who wrote join object aren't ponying boxes.
And who's screen attack?
So yeah, it's easy enough to install command and get rolling. And I would show you publish, but I'm not trying to publish things during demos to the public gallery, so sorry. I'm a reasonable man. For a local repo, we're going to just show you how to register them real quick, publish a module to it, and save a module from it. Actually, I haven't done this on this box yet, so it's a fresh box. And just to show you how this kind of all works within PowerShell, if I look at find module itself, it's in PowerShell get. I can say get command module PowerShell get. Register PS repository is the one I'm after. Dash syntax. Give my own quick view here. See if I actually need to look at greater help. Let's make a temp directory. I'll do it close to where I was. All right. Location is current directory, temp NuGet. PS repository now, should I have that one? And we're actually going to start by publishing a module to this and seeing where it contains. I'm going to go take my file finder here, which now has GUID. We're going to publish module path, file finder, repository. Repository have to be in string, yeah. So my local repo. And I apologize if this particular demo doesn't work. I have not published a module on this box yet. So it needs description and author. This is a small, simple lines, files. All right. And if I go look at my temp NuGet directory here, there's my file finder package. And I can go ahead and install module, name, file finder, repository, a local repo. So, current user, and actually I a quick knock on wood because I'm not sure it's not going to lap that module path, but it shouldn't. Yeah, I don't trust that repo, that's fine. The question I actually have is where these things went, but you know what, I can answer this in a different way. I can just go ahead and save module into path. I can type this where. There's my file finder module. There's its version directory. There are my files. Okay, so that's handy. Useful way to share your modules internally. Right? Anybody need more demos or discussion on this particular topic?
And that was just a file share based repository?
Yeah, that can be a file share as well.
Cool.
Any path will do. So it's handy. It is also possible if you want, you can create an Azure DevOps artifact feed and actually store them in there as well. That's a little bit more complicated and definitely beyond the scope of demos for today. Sorry.
In what way is it complicated?
You have to authenticate differently, and finding packages is a nightmare.
Got it. Okay.
So, oh, and it really, really doesn't like dependencies.
Oh, interesting.
So that last part meant that I had to basically rewrite parts of NuGet to, you know, go make it work. Anyway, fun as it is to remember that particular trauma. Any more questions on this one?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay. So, in the event that you want to avoid horrible tar pits of doom and damnation and let somebody else, handle it, you should know that modules can stack. Like, for instance, what I just mentioned wading through. If I throw that into a module, you can go import that module, use it, have a nice day. You don't need to understand the bloody thing about what I had to figure out about NuGet to be able to use the function that talks to NuGet. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Now, modules are nice in that they can formally stack. You don't need to put everything in one box. You can use a required, sorry, I'm missing a typo in here, that is a D. Required modules, these will require a module to load before you do, okay? You can also use nested modules. This is a lot less common, but works for certain scenarios. These will be loaded with your module, and to the user it'll appear as if they came from your module. They still have their own independent closures within your module, but to the user it looks like everything that came from a nested module came from your module. And also they, generally speaking, have to be packaged within it. So it's much more common to use required modules. Again, sorry, it's D here. Than it is to use nested modules, but they're both good to know. And if either of those is too much, you can also copy, paste, and embed an isolated function. There's no reason that I can't take what I have here, because this function doesn't talk to anything else aside from this fancy new validation that I have in there. I can throw that into another function. And what I can also do is I can take just the definition of this thing, throw it into a script block so that it doesn't export. Because functions export by default, but variables don't. So if I wanted to have another module that was built on top of this, and I'm being a little cheaty, I can basically just say, find old file is this. Squigglies. I can do that inside of my PSM1, or I can actually get a little bit more elegant and I can load up a bunch of PS1s and treat them this way. I'll show you an example of that later. But you can copy, paste, rip off of other people's stuff and throw it in as a private function. This is really, really easy to do, especially if you're controlling your exports. And I have already touched on this point repeatedly, but it's really easy to turn functions into script blocks into scripts. Okay. Again, for the person who just took a photo, it's required, not required. Sorry. Okay. Before we move on to the next bit, everybody get this thing?
Yeah, I had one comment on nested modules. One really good use case for nested modules is when you want a hybrid C# and PowerShell module, because you can just throw your DLL into nested modules that has your C# commandlets and just get a hybrid module for free.
Yes, although I'm kind of shocked anybody is still calling them that. I did not know that that term of mine had staying power.
I've never heard it before, honestly. I've just always called them that.
A hybrid module?
Yeah, hybrid modules, what I used to call when you have a largely script module where some commands are defined in C#. So, hybrid. It's less
same
easy
logic
to get
for me.
manifest, binary, or script. Plus the other ones are all official parts of the enum of what a says a module type could be, and then I'd have to explain what a hybrid module is to other people. I always thought it was obvious. I just stopped maybe 6 or 7 years ago trying. Anyway, this last point, burn it into your brains. This is very, very useful within PowerShell. Turning functions into little lambdas is very, very helpful, especially when you want to hide them from the rest of the world. All right. So did everybody get the stackability of modules?
Mm-hmm.
Seems like it, yep.
If you have too much stuff in a module, does it slow it down? Or like does caching take care of that? Or have you ever run into that? If you have a module that's of a certain size, then calling
Did you hear the question?
I did. I'm thinking exactly how I answer this one. Not deeply, but somewhat in some ways. You actually tend to hit a greater problem first. Okay, so the way it can impact performance is if you have a PSD1 and you explicitly export every single item in the PSD1, then it can take actually quite a while to import.
Well, hang on.
There's a SQL module that does this, SQL PS, I think, that basically, because of its difference between the PSM loading and because of the PSD1 filters about 500 or 600 commands, you end up taking 2 seconds to load the PSM1 and 20 seconds to load the PSD1. Now, there's certain things PSD1s can only do. You can't define formatting or require modules inside of a PSM1, right? So these are largely unavoidable, except by just not explicitly exporting and just exporting everything.
So hang on.
Letting export module member do your work. But there's one more thing that'll drive you nuts faster, and I can show this way easier than I can tell this, and then you can hang me on all you want. So I have a very large module here that created a term in PowerShell. So if I go get command module show UI, the term is commandlet overload. This is actually considerably scoped down to the 600 or so commands that it used to be. But because this is just so many commands, it kind of drives users nuts. It doesn't really make it clear how they're supposed to use the module in any way, shape, or form. And while it doesn't actually really drop the import speed that much, like we can just check. Command. This takes a quarter of a second. But wrapping your head around 519 commands is not easy. Okay, now, what were you holding on a second?
So my understanding is that the main thing that slows down both module loading and find command is using star in your PSD1. My understanding was that explicitly naming what to export in the PSD1, like in an actual array, is very, very quick. And that the thing that slows stuff down is when you say export like function star, for example, because then find command has to literally load the whole module in order to enumerate everything. Whereas when everything is 100% explicit in the PSD1, it's very quick to load.
Yeah, I found the opposite to be true. Although I generally don't constrain, I don't export by star. So I generally only declare the functions I'm going to export, which is very fast. And I don't constrain it in the PSD1 at all.
So you explicitly
I won't actually
export.
have functions to export in most of the PSD1s that I create because it adds that little extra level of drag. The reason I believe that it's slower to use individual ones than not is because basically orders of magnitude. If I have one wildcard, I only have to compare all 500 commands in show UI against that one wildcard. If I have 500 exports from show UI and I have 500 items in my constraint list for show UI, then I have to compare each and every single one.
So it's not supposed to do any comparison. Like it doesn't even look at the PSM1 at all until you actually call a command, if you explicitly export with no stars.
Again,
I believe
you're
that is
incorrect here.
correct.
It definitely has to look through the PSD1 to constrain.
The PSD one, yes, not the PSM one.
Are we cross-talking here? I'm saying the PSD1 explicit exports are where you get got.
And my understanding was the opposite.
Faster to export everything than it is to constrain exports.
Oh, I see. But it's faster to export explicitly than to export with stars.
Yes, but if you had 500 items, it's going to end up being slower than if you had 1 or 2 stars, because I still have to walk over each of the 500 items in the export list.
So I would still expect that exporting everything would be slower because the PSM one has to be loaded and parsed in the AST and run just to find what commands are in your module, no?
Honestly, if I had greater answers on this, I would have been able to make this way faster. My best theory from this is my example here. This module, it takes 2 or 3 seconds to load the PSM1 and takes 24 to load this.
VHLs is a beast.
Yeah. So my recommendation to them, DBH isn't something I'm involved in but don't control. My recommendation to them has been remove the PSD1 explicit exports. Because this very clearly is the step at which it drags, and there's nothing I can do to control that step.
Interesting.
So this is my proof in the pudding. Like, these both import roughly the same number of commands, but this will take 20 seconds to import through this, and much less so through the PSM1. That's getting way off track.
Gotcha. Sorry to derail.
Oh, no worries. It's a good base question. I would say that your modules, if they get too large, they will let you know in a number of respects, and they will become unwieldy. And that's the time you want to start splitting them up into smaller modules and stacking them on top of each other. It's one of the beautiful things about it. If you could just copy and paste a function from one spot to another, or move a few files around and have a new module, then you can slice and dice existing modules any way you'd like. And if it gets too big and unwieldy, we'll figure out a good split point. All right? That's where stackability is very, very, very nice. Okay, we are actually almost done, I promise. This is taken longer than I expected it to be. But everybody got stackability? Any more questions on this topic?
Nope.
Okay. So the next, brain fart to let into the room is I like to think of modules as projects. You basically keep all your related stuff related to a module within a given spot or directory, and just make it easy to have a module entirely self-contained, not just as a package, but as a set of associated files to make sure that they work exactly as you'd like or build exactly as you'd like. Now, by unofficial convention, most of these files that you find are declared with a .special extension, .ps1. And we're going to cover a couple of them, but the most common one that you probably have already known about is tester, which is test.ps1. Okay? Tester is a module that tests scripts. Test.ps1 contains blocks that look like describe a test, it works. This doesn't all have to be on one line, I'm just trying to make it readable on the slide deck. Has everybody used Tester? Most people, some people?
Woo!
Yeah.
Okay. Pretty easy, actually. It's not a bad unit testing framework. Your module will not require Tester, but the test script does. So we can actually write a little associated file that lives with our module, but does not run with our module, that actually makes sure that it works. So I'm just going to go create a quick one here. I'll find your test.ps1. Finder. Find big files. I'm not going to get too detailed here because this isn't a testing presentation. Get big file. Oh, do I have this imported right now? Fine, big file. Root path, current directory. I'm defaulting to a megabyte here, so I should not have anything larger than a megabyte. Files. I'll say big files.count should be 0. I'll hit F5. Yay, my test worked. Just for goodness sake, require module pester at the top of it. In case I was running into this file and I had no idea what pester was. And just to demonstrate that this kind of works as intended, if I just try to run this file now, having thrown in a junk module that doesn't exist, it yells at me. So now I got a test file there, and I can use invoke pester path to run it, or run that file directly as you've seen. I can say invoke pester here. Also, if I feel so crazy, ask for code coverage. And because all of my functions are named star dash star, I have a nice little wildcard I can use to go get it. Now, I'm not doing tons of testing here, so my code coverage isn't going to be great. It's actually quite abysmal. But you get the point. Hopefully. So, at the point I'm starting to throw in tests along with my module, it's treating my module directory not just as what I'm shipping, but as also my project directory for itself. Does this make sense in a kind of trippy meta way?
So would you ship the rest of those files with the module in the PS gallery?
Generally speaking, yes.
Including the tests?
Most definitely the tests, and we'll get to why in 2 bullet points.
Interesting.
But yes, most definitely the tests. Largely so that people can find out how it works. But one thing that should be pretty obvious at this point, though, is that it makes it really easy to integrate with CI/CD. If I have my test files checked in, same code base, same location with my module, then it's really, really easy to just say, go run your own tests. Make sense?
I've got a question for some of the room. What is CI/CD?
Okay. Continuous integration, continuous delivery. So when I check it in, it'll run my tests, and if it builds, it'll go to where it needs to go. That's CI/CD. But the real high-level answer to your question about why I'll ship it with it, by using Pester to test, people will trust my module more. If you can see my tests right there with my module, you know I've got tests. You have a number of more detailed examples about how to use it than you're going to have just in help. It increases your confidence of this module. So that's why you ship tests with.
Is it
go ahead.
Is it a standard practice to ship the tests with? I can't actually say I've seen it before.
I see it on most modules I run into. I don't know that I deeply pay attention, though.
Yeah, I don't deeply pay attention either, which is why I was curious.
but I definitely do it for any module I produce that has pester tests.
Huh.
So, plus, like, it helps people, understand that pester exists and how to test stuff in PowerShell. I think it's good to the universe.
Pester ships with PowerShell now, right?
I don't.
No.
Say what?
Doesn't Pester ship with PowerShell now?
I believe so, although I don't think it ships with PowerShell core, at least on Linux.
Yeah, it doesn't. But on servers that are 2016 and higher, it is included.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah.
Did not know that.
Yeah.
It's one of
Yeah.
the.
That and PS script analyzers included on all servers 2016 and higher.
That's cool.
Yeah, they're handy. You can also include in your functions in like PS script analyzer exceptions if you'd like. Script analyzer is pretty great for CI/CD as well. Moving on to something a little bit more esoteric, but still useful, you can actually have formatting for a module. I mean, you can format stuff in PowerShell by hand as much as you'd like. You can be that cruel to yourself. But if you would like, you can declare all your formatting within a module. There's a field formats to process, and this lists format PS1XML files that you can import. These have files that have been there since the beginning, and what they do is they control how an object is formatted. We're not going to get that deep into it. There's a whole other talk to be given on it. I have a module that's very old that's used to build them. It's called Easy Out. It's actually just been revised fairly recently to allow you to build colorized formatters. We're not going to get that crazy with it today, but we are going to make our formatting look that much better and integrate it with our module, and then basically call it a day for module editing. Like with Pester, my module does not require Easy Out, but the script should require it. Obviously, it's not going to work if you don't have it. So I'm actually going to create a new format file here. This actually comes with Easy Out. Just write easy format file, although I did find a bug in it earlier today. And let's go get some return values for our big files and do some decoration. What you can do with any given function in PowerShell or with any given return value in PowerShell is you can decorate how they come back. Or we had caching in one of these. Find old file. I'll use the big file, it's fine. Just to demonstrate the point. So if you have a given output or object, what you can do is you can say PS type names, clear, and then PS type names add big file, then output it. Now what I'll call this is decorating an object. Here are so many decorating objects in PowerShell. This is probably what they mean. And what I can then do here in our easy format, just write format view, name big file, property, name, and length. And actually, I'm going to get a little fancy here. And I'm going to say, here's length, a virtual property of length. It means I'm overriding how I want length to display. Let's say length divided by 1 MB, math, round that. A blank plus the rounded megabytes plus MB. Okay. So I'm going to go run this file real quick. This creates a format PS1XML. into our file finder here, and it's a formats to process is file finder format PS1 XML or module. Okay. Now I'm going to find big file on Scratch, which I know has some big files. And then I'm going to be disappointed in myself by, I'm guessing, typoing somewhere. Let's go back to our find big file here. Big files. There we go. Big file there. I do dislike it when the demo gods are not with me.
Kind of looks like the clear worked because those should just be file objects, but they're like
No,
you get
we're fine.
properties, right?
I don't know why. Actually, no, I have a fair idea of why I didn't have both the first time. There we go, though. Customized formatting. Again, we can go into a whole deep talk on this one. The point of it is that you can actually ship custom formatting with your module and that it makes for a better module.
So why did it not work the first time?
My guess is the heterogeneous output bug. I had one blank or one thing that wasn't decorated.
That makes sense.
And actually, it could be that I'm not Xing out what is or isn't a directory in there.
Is it the add, actually?
What?
Is it the add, actually, on the PS type?
It could be, but I don't think so. But we can double check if I can ever find it. Oh no, actually it's probably this.
Oh, yeah.
Don't ask me. Yeah, let's try that one more time. See if it hates me less. There we go.
Nice.
And I should have known that from the fact that I had 2 return values from each of them. Okay, so that's formatting. It's actually really easy to add, even though it looks god-awful if you go crack open a format PS1 XML. By the way, this is a tip of a horrible iceberg. Here is easy outs format XML. No, it's my modules in this one. So, you know, this isn't even that bad though. This is nothing. This is Pipeworks's format XML. PowerShell is a web language. And I'm not even gonna go really like over scroll down here. I'm just gonna move to the end here. So unless you want to write a couple thousand lines of XML with PowerShell embedded by hand, please use Easy Out. Your life will be better, your modules will look nicer, and as you can see with these easy format files, this is really not that bad, right?
Comparatively, no.
Yeah, that looks significantly
Not
better.
even, not comparatively. It's not that bad to format your object this way.
It's just better, yeah. I wish CLI XML would be something different. Or PS1 XML.
Oh, this isn't CLI XML. This is PS1 XML. It's far worse than CLI XML. CLI XML is comparatively easy. This thing didn't even have a bloody spec for 10 years. It's publicly. Yeah. If you want to get the best understanding of everything you can do inside of a formatter, I'd advise you to look at the help formatter. Because believe it or not, when you run get help, it's running through this above. And that is also a nightmare of several thousand lines. But if you're curious, you can learn that, or you can just use easy out. Now are you getting the joke of the module name?
Yeah.
So, formatting's great. Please only learn as much of formatting as you need to make your module pop a little bit, and don't drive yourself insane. Just tap me on the shoulder and ask for a new feature and easy out. Only one person on Earth needs to go mad for formatters. The rest of you can just use them. But they're very, very useful to making a better experience in your module. By using them, you can make sure that you're giving the exact output experience that people would expect, and you can basically make your module, well, resonate with your users. And if I'm starting to talk a little bit like a marketing person, this is because we got to the last of the brain farts. Modules are brands. You might not think of yourself as a marketer at all. You might think of yourself as a purely tech person, but you got to have at least a little bit of a marketing cap on when you think of a module, because modules are brands. What's in a module name? An expectation of functionality. When I go show you File Finder, do you have any questions about what this module is trying to do for you? Okay. What's the core about topic? It's a markdown brochure. Now, in this case, I didn't write a great brochure, but I could. Right? Marketing concerns, and you'll want to think like a marketer. If there are modules on Gallery and GitHub, they are public brands. If they're going to be used within your company, then they're internal brands. And if they're just yours, then it's still like the brand name in your head. I don't know if anybody's familiar with the concept of loci or memory houses, but modules are your memory houses. They are the little box in your brain that you file a bunch of PowerShell under, right? And if you're sharing that with other people, you want to go through the extra effort of making those modules nice and easy to use, and you want to name them in a way that actually makes sense and resonates with your user base. And you want to give them tests so that people trust them, and you want to give them formatters so that people aren't just looking at a bunch of properties going, what the hell? So modules can go all the way from a little script up to a market researched packaged product that you deliver to a customer. And while it's great to work your way to that thought process, you don't need to jump all the way in. Just take the baby steps that I showed you today. Take your little stub of a script, throw them into individual files per function, add your manifest, start to add more metadata, and as you start to do more with your module, throw more and more into your manifest and your folder structure. Try to follow as many common conventions as you can, and try to be creative and give your customers what they want. Also, please remember, don't be too afraid to rebrand, but realize that it is expensive. If you need to go send out a large email saying, hey, module X, Y, or Z is now module ABC, that can confuse people. Try to get it right the first time. It's better. All right, that's the bulk of the meat. I've got a few uncategorized tips and tricks for you, real quick, which apparently also have very, very broken animations. But these are all really handy to know. Some of them we've discussed. Some of the other ones I just wanted to make sure you got. Whoever got the phone ready, your camera ready, you probably want to snip this slide.
Pretty good.
This one I think I mentioned earlier, the being able to import arguments. I find it really handy if you wanted to make modules with different roles or that connect to different sets of resources. One example from the company I'm currently working with is a module that If you're running in a development role, we'll connect to the development servers, and if you're running in a test role, we'll connect to a different set. Okay? So it'll just change a bunch of different script variables depending on the arguments passed in. The only gotcha to note here is that you can't do parameter sets. You have only one set of parameters that you can ever pass in. And backcompat can become a bit of an issue if people start to get too used to it. But it's handy. This will also be any way that anytime you want to find where you currently are and what module you're in, this is great. And these just need to be spread into the universe more often. You can actually run whatever code you would like inside of a module if you use this trick. You either dot a module reference, then followed by a script block, or ampersand. Ampersand will create a nested scope within the module, and dot will run directly in the module scope. This is how you poke in your module once it's already loaded, or how you peek inside of somebody else's module.
Is this an intentional thing built into PowerShell, or is this like a side effect of how dot and work?
No, it's very intentionally built into PowerShell. Because otherwise, how the hell would you get to the information inside of the module? Remember, they're containers, they're not secured containers.
What would the use case for that be?
What do you mean, what would be the use case for that be?
I don't know, I've just never seen that used anywhere.
Well, for one, most people don't know you can do this.
Mm-hmm.
So that'll kind of limit its use case.
So consider pester in module scope, for example. Uses that.
Say what?
Pester in module scope.
I would be pretty sure it uses this. I haven't cracked that far open to tell. The scenario that you would most commonly use it for is, suppose you're using some caching variables, right? Don't you want to be able to look inside your module to be able to get out those variables and their data? If you're trying to debug your module on somebody else's box, all right? Not just with breakpoints, but they've gotten to a bad condition. They need to figure out why things are the way they are. Then you need to be able to poke into module scope. The other scenario where it's incredibly valuable and useful is being able to interchange. So you don't really deeply need module scope to do this unless you want to be very fancy. You can just use a module's private data. Every module will have a private data property bag that you can just assign stuff to. All right. But if you wanted to have module A run module B inside of module B, then this is how you have to go about it. Another scenario that it's valuable for is if you wanted to have access to internal information in a module from, say, a Lambda or a delegate. So if I've got an event handler that happens when I click a button, there's almost no way that that event handler is naturally going to be in the module scope. But if I want that button click to be bound to data within a module, I got to get there somehow. But I can probably count on both hands the number of times I've seen people actually use this in the wild. It's not common, except when you need to debug, and because it's so poorly documented, most people don't know how to debug this way. That's why I'm showing you it.
Cool.
Yeah, that's actually really cool.
It's useful.
It would have come in useful earlier today. Right, Aaliyah?
It
Yep.
probably comes useful sometime next week, and the week after that, and the week after that. It is really frustrating to me that this is not clearly documented in as many places as it should be. But it is handy, especially once you start to do interesting stuff with module scopes. The other one that I've got at the bottom here, I tend to actually use this sort of stuff when I'm trying to like pre-check a handshake. So one example, or one sort of example here, is in this PS DevOps module. Two things that I'll show off here actually. A function get invoke parameters. This script scoping here means that I'm only ever once getting what this is defined as. And I'm getting invoke ADO REST API, and then I'm getting any parameters that weren't part of invoke ADO REST API. The other thing that I'm sort of pointing out here, accidentally, this is a fairly recent module. One of the things that I'll do for private functionality is have a parts directory, and what I'll do in that is I'll just loop through that directory and declare each of the values as a script. So I have get invoke parameters here, little script, which I can use inside of a given function. I actually put that in relatively recently, so I'm not sure if I've got it in all the functions yet. But yeah, a lot like this. Because you as a user of my DevOps module, you never want to actually have a command that just tells you from a hash table what parameters are for one wrapper command inside of this module. But I, as a module author, need to do that all the freaking time. That's where this is handy. This gives you a very quick way to get to my module already exported this command. And that's that. If anybody needs to take a snip of this slide, do so now. But otherwise, 3, 2, 1. Oh. There we go.
Well, what were the
Mine is
last two?
sufficiently flown, eyeballs bleeding.
What were the last two on the last slide?
I mentioned them already. The last one is kind of nice. If I have a module itself, so if I say get module file finder, probably the easiest way to demonstrate is this. I go to take out its type names, clear, doesn't format correctly. But if I go get a new file finder, get module again, it still doesn't format correctly because it's the same bloody object. I get module file finder, type to add member note property tag your it. Once you load a module into memory, get module will return that exact instance until you unload it. It won't clone it, it won't create the instance based off of the class, it'll keep the exact data you had in memory for that module with any changes you made to it. So you can use this to handshake between modules. For instance, I can have a module that looks to see what other modules have a property named tag, and then I can do something special. Getting a little bit more direct with this, one example that's not using that exact part of it, but it's using the cousin of it, is back to that DevOps module. So see these two bits here? Extension modules. Basically says, take my own module, then call this little script with my own module, okay? And that part walks through all the loaded modules, modules that require this module or that tag this module. I'll consider an extension module and I'll go look for stuff in there. So it's getting really advanced. This sort of stuff is the key to module extensibility. to making modules that magically know that another module showed up and did something new. I'm not going to ask if that makes sense because I know it does not until you've been like 5 or 6 rounds through trying to make modules that plug with other modules.
So this
No offense, man.
So this basically enables like a plugin model for your module.
Yes. In this particular case, any module that requires or tags this module. But I can't throw a script block in private data or in your manifest. So if I wanted to have like a add member node property on does this make sense now? More? If you wanted to expose an event handler on your module, this is the sort of way you could go about it. If I wanted to allow any one of your other modules to be notified when something happened in my module, this is how I could go about it.
Interesting.
Yeah. Modules are very interesting. Also, can you all tell that this is the tip of a large iceberg?
Yeah.
But don't get overwhelmed by that iceberg. You can just throw a bunch of functions in a PSM1 and call it a day. If you're building a brand internally for yourself to have a little box of here are my 5 PowerShell scripts that I'm always going to need, then you don't need to be that fancy with it at all. Work your way to complexity. Or don't stare up the mountain.
Awesome. Anybody have any questions?
It's maybe a little facetious, but is there a dark mode for ISE? My millennial eyes, are kind of struggle between your dark script deck and ow.
I believe so. I just don't use it that often.
Oh, there are themes.
Oh, what?
I had no idea.
There.
Oh God.
It's pseudo.
Are you happy now? I am not happy now.
I think
Monochrome green.
Yeah, we definitely need to try monochrome green.
Okay.
It's the matrix.
There we go.
Now we're happy.
They weren't kidding about monochrome.
I feel like that kills all the beautiful color I've been trying to add.
Well, I definitely learned a few things. That was interesting.
Yeah.
You're good. I'm glad that it was interesting. Well, what few things would you like?
Yeah.
You had a few questions, you said?
No,
He
I
said
just
easy out.
Yes. What about easy out?
You asked what I had.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to take a look at that. And I think the discussion about nested modules was new to me, so I'm going to go look around at that a little bit more.
Yeah, it's a good thing to be aware of. I don't know, how familiar is the room with Node Package Manager at all, or with the Node.js ecosystem?
NPM, yeah.
So they're very, very include happy. basically every module in Node.js requires like 20 other modules. I don't want PowerShell to quite get to that point, but there is a tendency in PowerShell to not require anything, and I think that's a little overblown.
Yeah, didn't some module in Node cause like a bunch of websites to fail because of one module that everything else depended on?
Good old right left pad, right? Or
Yeah.
Yes, left pad.
They
Yeah.
stopped
Left
supporting
pad,
it or
yeah.
something.
I don't know anything for sure about that, but that's always a risk with dependencies. Dependencies could break. The advantage of this is if the whole world yells at one person, they'll probably fix it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, yeah,
Hopefully.
it's easy fixed, but it broke so much of it.
Sorry, I couldn't quite make that out.
No, I was saying, yeah, I mean, it was just one place to fix it, right? Not every, you have to fix it in every module. So it was quite easy to fix, but everybody, I guess the thing was the distribution and, the average of the cost that people got upset about. So, but it was kind of interesting to note when you say like, yeah, it's what you said before.
That they're stackable?
Yeah. I mean, that's the issue with having them stackable versus having no requirements at all. Nothing that requires it at all. So.
That is one way to view the issue. The other way to view the issue is the time you'd spend building the dependencies on your own.
Mm-hmm.
And I would bet that if you would take every one of those people that spent whatever amount of time fixing that, it would probably take them considerably longer to rewrite the stack of Node.js down to that module.
Sure.
And to understand Node.js to the level to do that. So 5 minutes of annoyance for one person, even every once in a while, is way better than, basically demanding that everybody in the world understand every part of computing down to its lowest and lowest depth. I joked when I said that only one person in the world needs to understand the format XML, but not deeply. It will drive you insane, and you don't have to go insane if one other person in the world is willing to go insane for you and figure it out. As long as they'll support it.
Yep.
But the good news about Easy Out and Pester in particular, well, more Easy Out than Pester, is because they're creating one-time artifacts. You don't need to, you don't need to worry if Easy Out changed because you've already got a version of it that works. And because it's not shipping something that depends on Easy Out, you don't need to worry unless PowerShell breaks its formatting layer, that formatting will continue to work.
Makes sense.
The background here inspired me to find an old tweet of mine, which might entertain people. Just if anybody wants to do Shining the home version. That went too quickly. Let me add a start. Yeah. Save yourself the time of going insane in the cold. It's actually snowing up here in Seattle.
It's what? It's snowing?
Barely, but yes.
I'll have to hit my family up.
It's not like it was a couple weeks ago. A couple weeks was worse. But yeah, let me be the dull boy. You just use Easy Out.
Well, thanks so much, James. It was great having
No
you.
worries. Thank you for spending the time. Let me know if you want another one in the future, but let's try to pick a smaller topic. Modules are a big beast.
Well, you did a good job with it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
No worries. Does everybody understand modules more than they did when they walked in?
Yes.
Mhm.
Zero when I got.
Does everybody feel Does anybody feel very overwhelmed by modules?
I do. I'm proud of how well I was able to follow, considering 0.
Okay. Again, don't stare up the mountain. Just use as much complexity as you need. So, they're easy as long as you let them do. And they're a really, really useful thing to kind of incorporate into how you approach PowerShell, because it makes it way easier to bucket what you know than, and I mentioned this Scratch directory. I don't think I've done a directory or a quick run through of it, but this is all my uncategorized. Good luck finding stuff in that. So I very much prefer making little modules. It's really quick and easy to get started. You don't have to be superbly advanced. Just write a couple files, get started, and learn more as you go.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you. Good time.
I'm sure I will talk to you soon.
Yep. Thanks. Bye.
Till next time.